Good afternoon, sir. With your permission, I'll just start. So, I'm Sandeep from the Department of External Relations at Indian School of Business, ISB. Also, an alumnus from the Bharati Institute's Advanced Management Program in Public Policy. Sir, we'll just welcome you all to the e-launch of this training module of climate change framework from journalists. Harushi, if I can request you to play that video, which details about this, and then we can go on to the next.
Welcome. I am delighted to introduce you to this course on climate change, specifically designed for journalists. I am Ashwini Chhatre. I am the Executive Director of the Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business. I am aware of the problem that anyone who wants to report on climate change has to face. And the problem is literally an infinite source of information. Anywhere you go, on YouTube, on Google, wherever you search, it is very hard to find the right information in a concise form. And I have personally looked at all the information that is necessary and created 5 short modules comprising a course that will introduce you to the basic elements of climate change. As a journalist, you need this course to understand the basic elements of climate change. But more than that, taking this course will also introduce you to different dimensions and allow you to specialize, to think more deeply about some elements compared to others. And the course will also allow you to understand ongoing debates, to interpret new reports and press releases that come from scientific organizations. You will be able to report on climate change with much more depth and much more clarity. I welcome you to try this course and provide us with the opportunity to help you report on climate change much better than previously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Warm welcome. A quick introduction of the speakers. We are from on behalf of Indian School of Business. We are extremely delighted to welcome Shri Jairam Ramesh, Honorable Member of Parliament and Chairman, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Environment and Forest and Science and Technology. We also have with us Dr. Andrew Fleming, British Deputy High Commissioner in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Now I would request Honorable MP Shri Jairam Ramesh to formally launch this program and address the participants. Just one statement I would like to mention, sir. In 2019, September, we had visited us and addressed our students at the ISB Leadership Summit. So in your address, you made a striking statement wherein you had said, our geographies are political, but our ecosystems are not. That's why environmental issues have become a matter of global concern. They continue to be a global concern. And just well ahead of the Glasgow COP26 conference, we felt it is very appropriate to actually start a discussion, a conversation around this. And then that's why we are here for the launch of this program. So I would request you to formally make an announcement of the launch of this program and address the audience. Thank you.
Well, let me first formally launch this somewhat unique program. Congratulate the Indian School of Business for bringing journalists interested in the area of climate change and headed to cover the Conference of Parties COP26 at Glasgow in a couple of weeks. And I think this is a very commendable initiative to brief these journalists well beforehand on the issues that are going to be discussed, negotiated, and hopefully finalized at Glasgow. I'm delighted that we are also joined by Mr. Andrew Fleming, and who is in many ways the host for the COP26. His government certainly is the host. And as the host government, it is expected to play a leadership role in ensuring that the issues that are of global concern get addressed in a meaningful manner. Now, as COP26 shows, this is the 26th occasion in which countries are meeting. That's what COP26 means. COP26 means that this is the conference of parties. This is a legal language for, actually it's conference of governments. This is an intergovernmental agreement. Governments negotiate, journalists report, civil society agitates, but ultimately governments negotiate. So this is the 26th occasion since the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, was signed in 1992 at Rio. So the first thing that I would request the journalists to do, which I'm sure is part of the program that's been put together by the ISB, is to familiarize yourself with the UNFCCC, the word that will keep getting repeated over and over again. But along with the UNFCCC, there was also another convention that got signed, which doesn't get the global attention that it deserves, but that is intimately linked with the whole challenge of global warming and climate change, which is the UN Convention on Biodiversity. So you have to look at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the UN Convention on Biodiversity as two sides of the same coin. They're really related to each other because biodiversity loss is certainly one reason why we have had this problem of global warming. And certainly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the way we have managed our biodiversity has exacerbated the situation that the world has had to confront. So you will, of course, get a flavor in this course about the background to COP26, the immediate background and the long background. But of course, the immediate background is the Paris conference of 2015, where we had the Paris Agreement, where countries came up with voluntary pledges on their contributions to minimize their emissions of greenhouse gases and thereby limit the extent of global warming. And Paris of 2015 was in turn really based on the foundations laid at Copenhagen in 2009 and Cancun in 2010. So this is a Copenhagen 2009, Cancun 2010, and Paris 2015 provide the essential framework for what is being discussed in Glasgow. Now, there are two big issues in Glasgow. The first issue, which you will have to watch out for, is to close the chapter on the Paris Agreement. There are many issues that were negotiated as part of the Paris Agreement that still have not got closure, that still have not been finalized in spite of, the 6 years that have gone by. So one task would certainly be at Glasgow to fill in the blanks, to fill in the details, the nitty-gritties of the Paris Agreement. So that's one issue that will be of paramount importance for those of you who are reporting, either physically from Glasgow or through online interaction. The second issue, of course, is the new commitments that the countries will make. The buzzword is net zero. Net zero in simple English really means that a country is putting as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as it is taking out. So in net, nothing, you don't add anything. So many countries have made commitments for 2050. China has made a commitment for 2060, and it's expected more and more countries would follow suit. There are pluses and minuses, we can discuss that. But the second big issue in Glasgow is a phrase that you will hear often in your reporting, which is increase the level of ambition, enhance the level of ambition over and above what countries have committed at Paris. The third thing that I think journalists should watch out for, particularly Indian journalists, there are all sorts of alliances in these global talks. when I was the environment minister for 2 consecutive years in Copenhagen and Cancun, 4 countries, what was called the quartet, the basic quartet, Brazil, South Africa, China, and India, functioned as a team, functioned as a quartet, negotiated as a quartet. Of course, looking at individual country interests, but we looked at it as a collective foursome. Similarly, there are other groupings. There is a grouping of small island states. There's a grouping of the African countries. There's a grouping of the developed countries. So I think, it's important to get a sense of these groupings because, while countries negotiate, they also form alliances, they also form groupings, they also form teams. And that enhances, of course, their power during the negotiation. And basic, Brazil, South Africa, India, and China was certainly a very important quartet that had been formed over a decade ago. So this is a third issue for journalists to watch out for. Fourthly, of course, I think the journalists would like to get a sense, which I'm sure the course would give them, about the scientific background. After all, these are political negotiations that are anchored in scientific reports of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I'm sure that you will do a lot of reading on the various reports of the IPCC, which is a scientific body, I must stress. It's a scientific body. It's a peer review, peer research type of a body. The IPCC itself does not do original research, but it brings together the results of peer-reviewed research in various areas of climate change. And finally, I would say that the background to Glasgow really is the extraordinary sequence of extreme events that is being witnessed across the globe. Europe witnessed this a few weeks ago, and India, certainly as we speak, it's raining in Delhi, something that is unheard of in the third week of October, and we have seen this extreme event leading to loss of life and property in Kerala in the last 48 hours. So this is another issue, the frequency of extreme events that really forms the background to Glasgow. Let me end by saying that, in the last 10 years, the discourse has shifted very, very significantly in India. 10 years ago, we were not convinced that we have to be part of the solution simply because we were not part of the problem. But 10 years later, I think we have become acutely aware and conscious of the vulnerabilities that we face, the multiple vulnerabilities that we face, the uncertainty of the monsoon, the retreat of the glaciers, deforestation, the increase in mean sea levels, and many other manifestations of climate change, that today India is a responsible player, it's a responsive player, and certainly is very much part of the global effort to find a solution, consistent, of course, with its own developmental aspirations. We have the challenge of economic growth, we have the challenge of demographic pressures that we have to contend with. But I think I would just leave you with this thought that I think there is a robust consensus in India that economic growth has to be rapid, that economic growth has to be inclusive, but most importantly, economic growth has to be sustainable as well. It has to be ecologically sustainable as well. So let me once again congratulate the Indian School of Business for exposing journalists to this program, an online program. And there's a lot to read. There's a lot to digest. Material keeps coming up very frequently, very regularly. So you have to keep yourself up to date on many of these things. And I wish all the journalists who are going to be covering Glasgow all the very best. And I hope some of you get an opportunity of actually visiting Glasgow and reporting on the COP. Nothing like reporting on the COP from the field, from the battleground, from the trenches, so to speak. Of course, keeping your masks and social distancing in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those insightful inputs. And now I request Dr. Andrew Fleming, British Deputy High Commissioner to Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, to share his.
Thank you very much indeed. Honourable Dr. Ramesh, and MP and Chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Environment, Forests and Climate Change, and my friend, Kumara Garu, Director of External Relations at ISB, and indeed all the journalists and students and others who are joining this session. May I first of all say good afternoon. And may I also join Dr. Ramesh in congratulating my friends from ISB for their initiative in putting together this primer for journalists. I think it is both timely and needed, and I am sure will prove invaluable in helping journalists intending to report on COP with their preparations. And not only reporting on the biggest event of its kind my government has ever hosted, biggest in terms of the number of delegates we are expecting, which is in excess of 30,000, but also biggest in terms of the importance for the future of our children and our planet. May I also commend Dr. Ramesh for his words. Both the pleasure and curse in speaking second is that much of what you prepare gets covered. But that gives me an opportunity perhaps to bring some other dimensions into this. Dr. Ramesh very eloquently explained the background to this. I think we're really fortunate to have such a chair of the committee he chairs, and undoubtedly his background as an environment minister is also invaluable. I think I would just add, with respect, in terms of a correct explanation of groupings, that some groupings, of course, do overlap in different ways, and one of the largest groupings is that of the Commonwealth, of which India and some of the smallest and most vulnerable island nations in the world are both very much part. And I would also agree that we do indeed need to look beyond the Paris Agreement with COP26 finally taking place after its year's delay. But I think it's very important we acknowledge what a landmark in terms of global efforts to tackle climate change the Paris Agreement was. So in representing a binding agreement and bringing all nations together over a common cause, that being to adapt to the effects of climate change and limit the rise of average global temperature to well below 2 degrees, and pursuing efforts towards 1.5 compared to pre-industrial levels. I think that framework that was set in Paris is very clear. In Paris, leaders provided the world with consensus, with the ambition and the hope. As Alok Sharma, MP, the Indian-born British minister who will be president of COP, he was born, for those of you who don't know, in the city of Agra, said in his speech in Paris last week, it was just the beginning of the road. And that is because unless we act immediately, the 1.5 degree limit will slip out of reach. Already, temperatures have risen at least 1.1 degree above pre-industrial levels. Extreme weather is on the march around the world, including here in my host city of Hyderabad, and of course, as Dr. Ramesh mentioned, the state of Kerala, where all our thoughts lie with those who have been affected. Elsewhere in the world, record temperatures have contributed to extreme famine in some of the poorest nations, Madagascar, Yemen, Ethiopia, to name but three. And here in India, we all love to behold the majesty of the Himalayas, which is a breathtaking geological creation. But already communities living in the foothills are clearly seeing the alarming impact of a warming in climate. Glaciers melt into giant lakes, which, as and when they burst their banks, have deadly consequences. And there are far more examples I could relay that impact on mankind, but time precludes me. I must, however, make mention of the flora and fauna that make up our planet, entire species of which scientists estimate are becoming extinct at alarming rates, as many as 2,000 individual cases being lost per year. And when a species is lost, it is lost forever. And so, for every living thing, human, animal, plant, every fraction of degree change really, really makes a difference. For example, at 1.5 degrees warming, 700 million people will be at risk of extreme heat waves. But at 2 degrees, that number will increase to 2 billion. At 1.5 degrees, 70% of the world's coral reefs will die. 2 degrees, they will all be gone and gone forever. And that's why the gathering of world leaders in Glasgow, just 13 days from now, must deliver an outcome which keeps 1.5 degrees within reach. The COP presidency are asking countries to deliver on 4 goals: emissions reductions, adaptation finance, working together, including to make negotiations in Glasgow a success. And we've seen progress. For example, India's neighbours, Bhutan, have already achieved the goal of net zero that many other governments around the world have far longer term targets to reach. But on each and every issue that will be discussed at COP, critically, we have to go further, much further. And our leaders, be they our heads of state, be they our ministers of environment, be they leading figures in industry or academia, all of them have a role to play, and all of them must deliver. And as journalists, you too have a big role to play. In the last week, when I was up in Delhi, I met 2 long-standing journalist friends of mine. Both report regularly on climate change in different, mostly in-depth articles. One of them's lucky enough that she's going to be going to COP. The other one is not going to COP. But both their roles, in my view, are of equal importance. The critical thing for me is reporting in a way that your readers or your listeners can understand, relate. A lot of the language spoken about the topic of climate change might sound perfectly okay to those of us that have been reading about it, talking about it, engaged with the issue for years or even for months. But for many people, that knowledge is not at that level. And we need to engage people in a way that they can understand, they can relate personally. I think images are also really, really powerful and important in this context, and not least in the country of India. I'm personally a Twitter addict. I'm tweeting every day on a number of issues, but I always try, when I want to get a message across, to include an image that has some impact. The saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words is definitely a point if that image is right. And Dr. Ramesh has mentioned the shift in India's position over the last decade. And today, most definitely, the UK see India as a critical partner in delivering whatever emerges from COP. But on the point of what might emerge from COP, even after COP has taken place, my point is that still we're just at the beginning. COP will not be judged on whatever agreement emerges from it, or at least that will be secondary judgment. What will be ultimately judged on is what happens on the back of those agreements being accepted and being implemented around the world, and that's critical. And again, that comes back to good journalism, explaining and convincing more people of the need for change, of the value for change, indeed, why it's absolutely critical to change. And I think, from my engagement, one of the things that really heartens me is the young people of India. My office has run climate change events every month since COP was originally planned to take place in 2020. So from the year before that, it started, and every month since December 2019, we've had an event. Some of the events have targeted business, some of the events have targeted specific issues, be it energy, or be it waste management, or recycling, or whatever. And some of them have targeted different age groups. And it's engaging young people, the youth of this country, and hearing the really profound messages that come from them is one of the things that I personally have found most moving. And so, I'm talking not so much about the coverage of COP itself, but in the longer term, what we can do to help identify, amplify some of these young champions who can really teach those of us in slightly older generations some food for thought in our policy making direction and decisions. So there were just a few thoughts on what can be done. And of course, in terms of what actually does emerge from COP, I think there's a very key role for ISB and like-minded institutions across India and the world to really look in detail at some of the outcomes and some of the challenges around implementation. And just as we've been having these monthly engagements as the UK and Hyderabad team, and many of my counterparts in our 7 other posts have been doing similar things, I think that will not stop just because COP has taken place. If anything, we need to do even more in the wake of COP, because the implementation phase will be a huge challenge, and that will need your focus, and that will need your reporting. So I am really happy to have been asked to join this session, and I really wish everybody participating all the best. I look forward, and I'm sure I will hear from my ISB friends some feedback on how it goes, and I look forward to hearing from you, your reporting, your stories. I encourage you to tag me, which you can do, Andrew 007 UK on Twitter or Insta, and I will amplify your stories and engage with you if I see that. So all the best, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Arishi, if we can open the floor for a few questions.
Yes. So please type in your questions on the chat box. In case you want to ask, please raise your hands. Both are welcome. By the time we have the first question, Guru, would you like to just begin with something?
Yeah. So thank you, Arushi. I think I would sort of start my role, which is to sort of thank everyone. But I do want to start with something that not many people may know, but Sri Jairam Ramesh is one of our founding members of the Indian School of Business. In the sense, he was involved in one of our early efforts to get the school going. And I remember he's been to ISB many times, but two instances that I remember I want to sort of recall. One is in 2014, you visited our campus in Mohali after the elections and had this very, very candid sort of conversation with our students. And I think that's something that students from that class remember even to this day as a master class from someone like you. I mean, this is something that I thought I would mention. The second thing was when we had this event with you at the University of Chicago Center in Delhi with Bahar, and again a collaborative event with the Bharati Institute. This was, I think, a few years ago. While we wait for the others to sort of join in, I do want to sort of thank you, Jairam Mishore, for your taking time out today to be with us, because it is a huge endorsement of our efforts to sort of contribute towards capacity building of various entities in some sense, to actually sort of help increase sort of knowledge in some sense of various constituents so that we can all do our jobs better. Arshi, is that a question that we should sort of, I see someone on the screen now. So while we wait for the question that may come through, if not, we can keep this brief.
So we've got some question on the chat.
Sure, go ahead, please. Yeah.
What gaps do you see in the current trend of communication for climate change, and how can we scale up such programs to maximize outreach, especially in diverse languages? This is a question by Yashashri.
Well, I think one of the gaps that we have is we have not succeeded in communicating effectively that climate change is not a long-term threat, but is a threat that is already having public health impacts today to our generation. See, most people look upon climate as a long-term issue. They look upon weather as a short-term issue and climate as a long-term issue. And I think this is true of environment reporting in general. This is not just true of climate change and global warming, but it's also true of pollution. It's true of chemical contamination. We must bring home the message that environmental issues are not some elitist upper middle class issues, but these are issues that affect day-to-day livelihoods of people. These are issues that affect the health of people. In many ways, COVID-19 is a public health disaster born out of an ecological imbalance, born out of the way we have managed biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity. So I would encourage the journalists, when they write, when they project, when they communicate, always remember that ultimately tie it up with concerns of day-to-day concerns of people. And the biggest concern that people have is public health. My health, the health of my family, the health of my children. So whether it's pollution, whether it's global warming, whether it's contamination, whether it's loss of forests, whether it's the extreme events, focus on the public health consequences. This is one of the great weaknesses of the environmental movement across the world. They've not focused on the public health dimensions of environment adequately.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh. There's another question by Ashwina Mahanti. She says, what role do you see academic institutions such as ISB playing in creating courses on scientific problems that are politically salient as well?
Well, it's very important that Indian institutions get active in analyzing various dimensions of climate change and publish the results of their research. Remember, this whole IPCC exercise for the last 25 years is based on published research. And one of the big frustrations I had when I was minister is that over 95% of the published research came from institutions in the US and the UK and Germany, and not from institutions in India and other countries which are maximally affected by climate change. That's because, generally Indian researchers love to talk. They don't like publishing. Publishing means writing. Writing means discipline. Whereas Indian academics love to give lectures, we are an oral civilization. We are not a written civilization. So our academics must publish their research. And once they publish their research, then, it gets into a peer-reviewed domain and it becomes part of the global discourse. So we must, I think Indian academic institutions, not just scientific institutions, but also policy research institutions like the ISB, must be actively publishing not just the causes of climate change, but also on the consequences of climate change.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh. In fact, we amongst ourselves have Professor Anjal Prakash with us here in this session, who is the lead author of IPCC for the current report. So it's a privilege to have this kind of faculty with us at ISB who are at these forums. The next question that we have is from Danish Hakim, who is saying, how do you think the issue of climate change can be reached out to the youth, especially maybe through social media or other ways?
Sorry, I didn't, your voice cracked.
So how do you think that the issue of climate change can be communicated to the youth today?
Well, the youth are far more concerned about climate change than the oldies. The younger generation is far ahead of the governments of the day. Governments move slowly. There is a large youth constituency which is concerned about rivers, mountains, glaciers. People's livelihoods are involved, It's also a women's issue in many ways. There's a very strong gender dimension to environmental movements. All the great environmental movements in India, the Chipko movement, the Silent Valley movement, the Narmada movement, have been led by women, largely because livelihoods have been involved, and livelihoods are of direct concern to women. So, we need to communicate this, but it has to be communicated in an idiom that people relate to. And today, my view is that after being battered for 18 months by COVID-19, people will relate to anything that concerns their health. It concerns their public health of their families. So that's why I said, look at pollution from a health point of view. Look at global warming from a health point of view. Look at chemical contamination from a health point of view. It's important to get the public health guys writing about environment as much as to get the environment guys to write about public health. These are not two silos. You have to break down the silos. I think one of the follow-up courses that the ISB should do is for public health correspondents and sensitize the public health, people who write on public health, on environmental issues that are leading to public health disasters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh, for this suggestion.
Actually, can we get Dr. Andrew's views on this question, since he interacts a lot with youth? Andrew? Sorry, you can hear.
On the issue of youth specifically, you want me to talk about? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I did talk about it in my speech to a point, but I just think we have to be imaginative and creative in how we connect with our youth. Definitely, the media has one role to play in that. There are media platforms that my children know about that I don't know about, Snapchat and God knows what else. You know, I wouldn't even know how to begin having a presence there, but I'm sure savvy young media professionals know that, and we have to use we have to use TikTok, just as I try to use, and I think it's been very effective, my Twitter handle, but I think it's engaged with a slightly older older grouping. You know, my children are all Twitter, and as for Facebook, it's another generation behind even me. So that kind of creativity is really important, and also, I mean, there's much more of a want. I think, you know, if I can say, using my children as an example, and, you know, I don't want to be accused of generalizing, but, you know, they'd much rather listen to a YouTube conversation or explanation on something than they would to be able to read about it. It's just an issue of generational laziness, I guess. And so, you know, more elaborate use of this kind of platform as well, I think, is another really, really good way of doing it. And it's not that I'm just saying it, because, you know, a number of activists from younger generations of mine are very much using these platforms, both in the field of climate change as well as many other issues that youth are identifying with. So I would encourage all of that. The other thing that we've done, and it's been successful, is that we've run ad hoc different competitions, writing competitions, photography competitions. These kind of issues have drawn people into engagement. And after we've managed to engage and get across our messages, so you know, the same people have kept coming back and joining us. So this has also been quite useful. And I have no idea in terms of the current curriculum in schools, but here in India, when it comes to the risks and implications of climate change, I probably should know that. But in the UK, definitely there's been much more focus on that, and that's another obvious way to engage young people up to and including those who are entering university. So again, you know, there is an opportunity to look at that perhaps as well. So just randomly, these are a few more thoughts to expand on what I had earlier said.
Thank you, Andrew. Guru, I'll just take two more questions now. The one now is from Rohit Prashar, who is a journalist. How will this program benefit Hindi or other regional language journalists? This is a question for us. So Rohit, right now, the language of the program is English, and we do intend to transcribe it and also, you know, at least have subtitles so that everyone, even in Hindi, can understand what the faculty is talking about. But this will take a little time, and we do understand that. We will get back to you. We have your contacts, and we'll get back to you as soon as the program is, the course is available in Hindi. The next question is, we all know that Himalayan region is most vulnerable to climate change. So are you considering a special program for journalists reporting on climate change from this region? Guru, I think you did one of the panel discussions on this issue earlier with where I think you and British High Commission were also involved. Maybe we can propose the same to our faculty here, and we can look at this. Thank you for your suggestion, Rohit.
Thank you. So
you want to answer
questions?
Just one last question. So Avantika is saying there's a vast and growing gap between urgency to fight climate change and the policies needed to combat it. What should be India's next few steps in closing this gap, according to you? Dr. Ramesh, this question is for you.
Well, we made commitments at Copenhagen. We made commitments at Cancun, and formally they became part of the Paris Agreement in 2015. We have, as I said, we have developmental goals as well, which we cannot completely ignore. We have demographic pressures that we have to contend with. So therefore, the urgency and primacy of economic growth, getting investment, getting jobs, and so on. But at the same time, we can no longer afford to look upon economic growth in an ecological vacuum. It has to be part of an ecological sustainability strategy. So there are choices to be made. I mean, we can't do what the Germans have done, for example. Germany has said no coal, no lignite, no nuclear power. I don't think India can say that today. But India can certainly unveil a phase, not a phase out strategy, but it can certainly unveil a phase down strategy for the use of fossil fuels. I mean, it should be possible for India to say, for example, that by the year 2040, we will not be selling petrol and diesel cars in India. We would have all electric vehicles by the year 2040. I mean, these are doable things. But for India to say that, we're going to be net zero by 2050 is a completely bogus target. We'll get global headlines, but none of us, I certainly won't be alive in the year 2050 to hold myself accountable to such a meaningless pledge. These pledges, we tend to backload these pledges, what we will do in 2050, what we'll do in 2060, and we get all excited by it. For me, it's more important, what are we committing for 2025? What are we committing for 2030? What are we committing for 2035? And hold ourselves accountable, both domestically and internationally. So I think, I can't see in my lifetime an India that is not using fossil fuels. But we can certainly move along a trajectory that is a declining trajectory of the use of fossil fuels, particularly in areas like transportation and in other areas. So I think we can afford to be bold, but at the same time, we can't afford to be foolhardy because, we need economic growth, we need electricity, we need to increase consumption standards, we need to improve living standards and the quality of life. And, we shouldn't romanticize renewables. Renewables are crucial, and prices of solar power, when I was minister, it was 15 rupees a unit. Now it's down to less than 3 rupees a unit. So there's been a revolution in solar technology, which India should harness and is harnessing. But to say that India can do without coal, India can do without nuclear, being completely unrealistic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh. Thank you so much, Andrew. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Arushi. Shri Jairam Ramesh, thank you very much for taking time out this afternoon to be with us, not only for your comments at the beginning and for formally launching this primer, but also for the taking all the questions and giving some of those insights, very practical ones indeed. I was particularly enthused by one point that you mentioned about the need for Indian academic institutions to focus on research and to publish, for Indian academics to publish in peer-reviewed international top-ranked journals. And I think that the reason I'm saying I'm very enthused by that is because that's in some sense the core of what ISB stands for. Because it's in our vision statement, it's in everything that we do, that we're a research-driven school. Our faculty are hired based on their research credentials, their potential to publish in top-tier journals. The whole structure at ISB is incentivized towards that. So I think in some sense, that's I just wanted to report that. Arushi mentioned about one of our faculty members at the Bharati Institute is actually a lead IPCC author as well. So it just goes to say how the three legs of ISB, if I may say so, is based on research, education, and outreach. And this, in fact, this primer is a very good example of knowledge that we're putting out towards capacity building, targeted at a specific group in this case, which is journalists, is actually an educational program that's coming from research, based on our faculty work and so on. So I think it's something that we're very happy, and thank you for your endorsement and for launching this course. Andrew, thank you very much as always for being a big supporter of ISB. And I think needless to say, if there is a poll today in India of the top 3 or 4 diplomats who are sort of masters at diplomacy, I think you will top pretty much high up there. So I think it's great to have you and the support of your mission. To one of Arushi's points or the questions that was asked earlier, yes, we did do a masterclass or a webinar on sort of climate change and its impact on the glaciers and Himalayas. And we'd love to continue some of those things. Whether will it result in a full-fledged course or not, I don't know. It's too early to comment, but it's something that we are, as always, open to ideas and open to explore. But we can always think of doing more of these webinars, which are informative, educative, and sort of, gives us the right context within which to assimilate information that comes our way. I want to thank Arushi and Sandeep, my colleagues here, for their efforts in getting this afternoon's program. And also, more importantly, the team at Bharati Institute, led by Professor Ashwini Chatre, who, in fact, right now is on a digital detox and therefore isn't here with us. But he's done his work, he's got the video produced, he's put everything out, but he isn't with us for another few days. And therefore, thanks to him and the entire team at Bharati Institute for producing this. To all our friends, journalist friends who have joined us this afternoon, this is for you. So thank you very much for joining us. Do tell us, share feedback, do tell us what you think of it. Also, please sort of refer this to your friends and colleagues who you think may benefit from this. And this is our first effort in this space. We'd love to sort of build on it, and your feedback is very important. And more broadly, on a more general note, we want to thank you for your support. As a group, your support is very crucial and has been very encouraging to ISB always. So I want to thank you all for that. I think all of us have a responsibility towards climate change and sort of ensuring that there's greater awareness, but more importantly, there's real action towards it. And I think, as Mr. Jairam Ramesh reminded us, it isn't something out there in the future in 2050 or 2047, because we love to keep these long-term goals, but it's something that is affecting us here and now. Let us work towards it. Let us inform ourselves better. Let us strive to make a difference in whatever little way that we can. And on that note, I want to thank all of you who joined us today and sort of wish you well. Those of you who are taking up the course, I think we will get the details right after this. We'll also put it on our social media handles, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Insta, everywhere, of ISB and the Bharati Institute. I will also send you emailers. So please do sign up and happy learning. Thank you very much.